One of the goals of HTML5 was to make the web wholly independent of plugins such as Silverlight or Flash or Java applets. In order to do so, there were two key technologies: video and graphics. To handle this, HTML introduces the Canvas API. Canvas creates a drawing surface, a blank area within the browser. That area is marked off in coordinates, XY coordinates, where the 0, point is the upper left-hand corner, and X increases as it moves to the right, and Y increases as it moves down. With these coordinates, of course, you can achieve precise control over the placement of any object whatsoever. The canvas element itself is extremely simple, and typically you'll add only a few attributes to it. The most important is whether you're working with 2D versus 3D, that is WebGL. But remember that WebGL is only supported in browsers that implement the WebGL library. We're going to start with rectangles, as they are the one shape that are fully supported by the canvas element. To create a rectangle, there are three basic properties that you will set: stroke, which effectively creates a border; fill, which effectively creates a solid; and clear, which can be used to remove a section of a solid, as you see here. Let's take a look at what that looks like in code. For purposes of demonstrating the canvas, we're going to start with three very simple files. Index.html will be our main HTML file. And you can see that in this file we have a link to a style sheet called mystyles.css. That file has virtually nothing in it, just a body tag. In addition, you can see that there's a line that connects us to script.js. Script.js begins with an initiate function and an event listener on the load event that calls that function. Currently, that function doesn't do anything. The title is set to Demo HTML5 and the body is empty. This is a good place to get started. Let's begin in our body by creating a section for our canvas. And within the canvas section, we'll create a canvas, give it an ID and a width and a height. Those are really the only attributes that we're going to need for now. So we have a 500 by 300 canvas whose ID is canvas. Let's save that. All of the work with the canvas is done in JavaScript. So let's turn to our script file and begin by getting the canvas itself. We'll declare a variable named element and call getElement by ID on that element, getting our canvas. Now we need to get the context for that canvas, and we do that by calling getContext and passing in whether we want 2D or WebGL. We're going to pass in 2D. We'll be working with two-dimensional objects. In order to create a rectangle, we need to start with either stroke rect or fill rect, though we certainly can do both. Let's begin with stroke rect. Here we're creating a rectangle outline starting at location 100, 100 and with a height and width of 120. Let's run that in Opera. And sure enough, there's our rectangle. We can now return to our code and add another rectangle, this time a fill rect. Notice that the fill rect is starting offset from the stroke rect. It's starting at 110, 110, and its size is smaller. Its height and width is only 100. Let's save that file, return to our browser, and refresh. And now we have a solid rectangle within the border rectangle. Before we stop, let's come back and add one more rectangle. This will be a clear rectangle, which will clear out anything that's already there. We're going to put that at 130, 130 and make it small, just 30 by 30. Let's save that, return to our browser, update, and you can see how the clear rect has essentially made a window or a hole in our solid rectangle. So far, we've been working with the default color for stroke and fill of black. But we can, of course, introduce color. Let's return to the code. And the color has to be added before we call stroke rect or fill rect. And we do it using the canvas fill style or stroke style. For example, for the fill color, we're going to say canvas.fillStyle, and now we can give it a value in any number of ways. The easiest is a hex value, an RGB value. And so we're going to say 0 red, 0 green, FF for blue, so solid blue. Similarly, we can say canvas.strokeStyle, and in this case, we'll make it red, so we'll say FF0000. We can save that, return to our browser, and update. And sure enough, we get a red stroke and a solid blue fill. Virtually every graphing system supports the concept of linear and radial gradients. In HTML5, you create a linear gradient passing in the x and y of the initial position and the x and y of the final position. Radial gradients are actually created with two circles. You pass in the x and y of the center of the first circle and its radius, and the x and y of the second circle and its radius. In either case, you can add color stops specifying the colors to create the gradient, where the position is a value between 0 and 1. Let's return to our code and take a look at creating gradients. We can begin by creating a gradient by calling createLinearGradient on the canvas. We'll set our x1 and y1 positions to 0, 0. We'll set our x2 position to 10 and our y2 position to 100. Because they're not the same, we'll get a bit of a slant to the gradient. We can now add color stops to the gradient. The first color that we'll add will be halfway, so it's 0.5, and we'll set the color using a hex value again. And this time what we'll set is a lighter blue. So let's set that to 88FF. Now we'll set a color stop for the end, so at 1, and the color that we're going to set will be straight red. All we need to do now is set the fill style for our canvas to the gradient we just created. We're ready to draw a rectangle. Let's draw our first rectangle by saying canvas fill rect and passing in the coordinates, and we'll pass in 150, 10 and 200, 100. Let's save that and take a look at that in the browser. And we get a beautiful radial gradient. Now what's important to understand is that the radial gradient is built with respect to the canvas and not the rectangle. So if I locate a second rectangle in a different area, I'm going to get a different part of the gradient. Let's return to the code and add a second rectangle. And this time set its starting position at 410 and its width and height at 100. Save that, return to my browser, and update my browser. And you can see that we're further along the gradient. It's as if the rectangle were a window into the gradient. Notice that the bottom is solid red. If I put a rectangle down here, we're not going to see any gradient at all. Let's try that. Return to the code. And this time we'll start at 400 again, but at 150 on the Y. Save that. Return to our browser and update. And you can see that that is solid red. And that's because this part of the gradient down here no longer shows that conversion, but is in the solid red territory, just as if I put a rectangle way up here, it would be solid blue. So far, we've been drawing directly on the canvas, but that's not how most drawing is accomplished in HTML5. Instead, most drawing is accomplished with a path. A path is a pattern for the pen to follow. It says move here and move there, draw from here to there, and so forth. Once you have set where the path is going to go, then that information is sent to the canvas. There are a number of methods and commands associated with paths. Move to moves the pen to an XY coordinate without drawing. Line to is just like move to, but the pen is drawing as it moves. Close path will draw a line from wherever the pen is to the start of the path. Clip will create a clipping region outside of which all of the drawing will be clipped away. Rectangle creates a rectangle as you would expect. An arc creates a circle or part of a circle. There are two methods for drawing curves: quadratic curve 2 and Bezier curve 2. Let's take a look at what all of this looks like in code.